Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another AP Environmental Science screencast with your AP Environmental Science teacher, Mr. Stano. And when we last left off, we were talking about resources, human growth, our natural capital, and services that Earth provides. We can take all that, see how people utilize it, and come up with our ecological footprint. You can go online, and you can find numerous calculators to calculate your ecological footprint. And basically what it's looking at is our resource consumption, our use, and basically how much of the earth we would basically have to use, or basically that is kind of granted to us on a scale. So if we look at the United States, we could see here that the total footprint in million of hectares and the share of global ecological capacity, basically how much of the earth we're using, or the capacity of the earth, is roughly 3,000 or 2,800 million hectares. That's how much the United States basically uses of the earth, or 1/4 of the earth. So United States is up there. European Union, notice it's decreasing. But if we look at a place like Japan, they use 5% of the earth's capacity to basically produce and sustain. If we look at it per person, we use about 10 hectares per person. So if you, with everything you have, basically wanted to keep your life going, you would need 10 hectares. That's it. So a hectare is basically just an area of land. So you would need that. European Union, I notice it decreases. China decreases. India decreases. These people in India need very little amount of land to keep their lifestyle going. Versus Japan right here, you can see it's a bump up. Highly technological society. Once again, they're just going to need more per person to sustain that. And if you look at humanity's ecological footprint, it's going up and up and up. As we want more, consume more, use more, and live in the age that we live in now, we need more of Earth's resources to sustain that lifestyle. And if you look, this is at one Earth. We've exceeded that. We've exceeded Earth's ecological capacity. So what ends up happening is some people have more than others to balance it out. And then that's when we see the problems happening. Or we see problems happening with our natural capital and services not being able to keep up with it. And how long can we sustain that for? We're not really sure. Which brings us basically to pollution. The overuse of those resources, or how we utilize these resources, is going to lead to this. We can basically have three types of pollutants, or the effects from it. They can disrupt or degrade life support systems, which we've talked about a little bit. Can damage health and property. So we can see that with people in their areas. Just in Texas, they had a huge algae bloom within their water supply, producing these toxins. Well, that just degraded a life support system for them. And it affected also health of those people. Now they can't use their water. We can also create nuisances such as noise, unpleasant smells, tastes, and sights. Those are basically your types of pollution, or the effects that they can have. We're going to definitely be going more into that. The environmental problems or causes of these, probably the biggest cause of these right here is population growth. We didn't see these issues going back hundreds of years when the population was quite low, when it was at 1 billion people or even less than that. As we started getting up into the billions of people, we've noticed that this is where we start to see more of those problems. The Earth's natural systems cannot keep up with our growth. Definitely another big one, wasteful resource use. What we're doing with our resources and how we're using it. Poverty, big thing, big issue. Poor environmental accounting. We see this with our world fish populations, how it's been decreasing because we haven't been able to accurately keep track of it, or due to some countries actually purposely not keeping good records of their fish catches. And ultimately, we're going to see a huge decline in our world's fish populations, and then basically outright ignoring any problems that we may have. And we're going to go into each one of these more in depth. What we can look at here is basically what we have: solar capital, our energy coming in, our earth, and the different human capital, natural capital, which we've been talking about, and how we can combine these together. And what we get goods and services. Basically, a real simple example, we take trees and we can produce anything from homes with it, paper, a number of different furniture items, huge different amounts of items we can produce from it, so we get those goods and services. But what also is made, heat is produced. We take this solar capital, this high quality energy, and next thing you know, it's getting reduced down to heat. We're depleting those resources. So we can see the forest getting cut down, degradation of renewable resources, and pollution and waste. Well, when we make paper, we're not using all the tree. There's some left over. We try to account for that. We try to make uses for each of the different types of waste, but ultimately, it's got to end up somewhere, either after being consumed, during the consumption process, or prior to in the manufacturing of it. So we could look at, just once again, all these in a little bit different way. So population growth, once again, one of our biggest problems, just not using our resources well. Poverty, not including environmental costs. This is a big one. Well, when you buy that phone or you buy the iPad or the new computer, what other environmental costs are there besides just your cost, the monetary cost associated to it, and then basically trying to manage and simplify nature without knowing how it works. So what happens when we plant hundreds of thousands of acres of corn? What does that have on our system? What effects does that have? Prevention versus cleanup. So we've done this. So do we try to prevent problems, or do we let the problems happen and then clean up after them? And there's pros and cons with each of them. If we rely on cleanup, it's just basically, we know there was a problem, we did it, now we have to clean up or fix our mistake. We see this at Brookhaven National Lab. Through years, basically going back from World War I, World War II, when they were used as army bases, up until it's taken over the Department of Energy, we saw that there were issues with groundwater there and the ignorance that was there, or basically people didn't know that these were going to be problems in the future. Now spending billions of dollars to clean up groundwater within Brookhaven National Lab and around it. Temporary bandage, like we said, we have to fix the issues, how it occurred, and also fix afterwards to make sure that it's maintained for future. So we can remove a pollutant from one part of the environment, but then, all right, so now we remove these pollutants, these harmful additives to the ground. Well, what do we do with them now? Where are they going? And just costs a huge amount of issues with people, monetarily and health-wise. We could look at poverty, once again, with environmental problems. And we're going to be looking through these. Adequate sanitation. Huge issue right here in preparation of food, in living conditions. We could see 37% or 1/3 of the people don't have adequate sanitation. Fuel for heating and cooking. Another third of the people right there. Electricity. 2 billion people, 1.6 million, or 1/4 of the world's population don't have access to this electricity. Clean drinking water, definitely, I would actually suspect it'd probably be higher up on this list. We're looking at about 1 billion people. That's a lot, 1 out of 7 people not having access to clean drinking water. Healthcare, and enough food for health. You can see they're all tied right there. So poverty is linked to all these environmental problems. When you don't have the resources to get to electricity, drinking water, and healthcare, that's when we have problems. Resource consumption, environmental problems. We can see underconsumption and then overconsumption. Affluent people, affluenza is unsustainable addiction to overconsumption of materialism. Basically, people just buying and buying and buying, using, consuming without regards as to basically where that resource came from. We can look at the affluence, or basically the consumerism, the affluenza, and tie it to basically our Earth. So we have developed countries right here. They consume more per person, and then basically the technology we have is also going to impact more, and then the impact it's going to have on our population, or the environmental impact, versus developing country right here. Maybe have a little bit higher population per equal. They don't consume as much. Their technology is less. So overall, their impact is less. We have a few changes that happened within human history. We had the agricultural revolution about 10,000 years ago. And this allowed people to stay in one place, not have to move and hunt and search for their food. It took a while before we got into the industrial medical revolution. Basically, advances in medicine that dropped our death rates, but allowed for an increase in birth rates. And this is when we really start to see an increase in population. Now we're in this information globalization age or revolution, where access to information can be had within a click of a button or a mouse. There are some trade-offs to this. So within the industrial medical revolution, what we see is definitely a higher standard of living for many. We see leisure time really starting to come about, and people really starting to have more time for themselves. Mass production of useful and affordable products, making it easy for people to get certain products and cheaply. Like I said earlier, lower infant mortality, longer life expectancy, which are all going to increase that population growth rate. Increased urbanization, people coming closer together and living in higher, denser populations. And we can see a lower rate of population growth in our developed nations. Disadvantages? Well, look at the toll it takes on all of our natural services. So these are taking a toll on basically what the earth does for us. Certain worldviews are accounted from. We have basically optimists or technological optimists that basically human ingenuity will keep the environment sustainable, keep it going. And then there's pessimists that basically overstate the problems that we have and basically will say, well, there's nothing really we can do about it. We're going to go more in there's more worldviews. It's just a brief little overview, basically kind of like looking at it in two different ways. What we can do is look at how nature keeps it sustainable. The Earth is 4.6 billion years. For about 4 billion of those years, a little less, maybe 3.5 billion years, it did whatever it did to keep itself going. So what we can do as humans is look at the Earth to try to mimic those processes to keep our planet sustainable. So we can rely on solar energy that comes in, or systems that rely on solar energy, keeping biodiversity high. Nutrient cycling, looking at how the Earth takes these finite amount of nutrients and these resources and keeps them within the Earth, and then how it keeps populations controlled. Aldo Leopold, born in the late 1800s, probably like the father of like the environmental movement, or really just the environment in general. Individuals matter. We have the ability to make changes. We should love our land, respect it, because it's really what we come from. And we abuse land because we regard it as a commodity. We think of it as something useful to us. These are some of the things that he said. And these are just some principles of sustainability. This is just like that previous diagram that we looked at. And what we can look at now and how we can make them sustainable. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this screencast, this little look into Chapter 1 of the Miller textbook. That's about it. I look forward to seeing you again, Chapter 2. Take care. Goodbye.